So even though we're still doing human physiology, we're going to call this Unit 3 now because we need to break it up somehow. It's a lot of chapters. We have 2 sections of physiology left. This one, the respiratory system, and then lastly will be the circulatory system. So before we talk about anything to do with your respiratory system, we need to talk about a couple of words. And the words are respiration and breathing. So one of the key ideas, and if you haven't ever looked at this, I would encourage you to. If you look at the program of studies, it's the curriculum, it's the document that I'm required to base my lessons off of. One of the main ideas in this particular unit, this section on respiration, is for us to understand how your respiratory system exchanges energy and matter with the environment. And so I want to let you know that we have actually talked about part of respiration already when we did cellular respiration. So when we say the word respiration, what we are talking about are some sort of cell processes that are going to produce energy in the long run. Now, does each type of respiration immediately produce energy? No, but they all work together to produce energy. When we're talking about producing energy, we are, of course, talking about ATP. So cellular respiration, we already learned about. It is not the main focus here. I'm just reminding you that it plays a role in this whole respiration producing energy process. This is where we take oxygen and glucose, we convert it to CO2, H2O, and energy. And this is happening, like its name suggests, inside of cells. Now you know more. You know specifically about mitochondria and all sorts of things. That is not the point of this chapter. I won't quiz you in this chapter on cell respiration little details. We might review some of them because it's good to do that. But then we have a couple of words that we haven't discussed yet. External respiration and internal respiration. And so those prefixes give you a good clue as to where this might be happening. External respiration involves your lungs. External respiration is when air and matter are exchanged between the outside environment and the tissues in your lungs that are surrounded by blood vessels. So, in your lungs, what is happening? Stuff that's in the air is coming in and getting into your bloodstream. Stuff that's in your bloodstream is coming out, going back out into the air. So specifically, what are those two things? Oxygen is coming in, CO2 is going out. So this is linked to cellular respiration. Cellular respiration needs oxygen. So your lungs are getting that oxygen from the air, putting it into your bloodstream. Cellular respiration produces CO2. Your lungs take that CO2 from your bloodstream and put it back out into the air. Now, internal respiration is the link between that and a cell. So remember, your cells are not made out of blood. Your cells get things from your blood. So internal respiration is the connection between your blood and your cells. So in general, oxygen will be going from your blood to your cells, and CO2, which is the waste product, will come out of your cells, go into your blood, so that it can get transported to your lungs, so that you can breathe it out. So respiration is that collection of processes that are eventually going to let us produce ATP. Breathing, which some people might want to use interchangeably with respiration, actually only refers to the processes of inspiration, or we could say inhalation, and expiration or exhalation. Now there, it doesn't matter to me if you want to say inspire or inhale, because to me they are referring to the same processes. Breathing are these processes that allow air to move. They make no reference to whether you're going to produce energy with them or not. Breathing is really based on some muscles that you have and what they are doing. So respiration is about producing energy. Breathing is a mechanical process, and breathing is just talking about the movement of your muscles that creates movement of air, but we're not saying anything about energy there. Now, does anyone have anything that they want to ask about breathing or about respiration? So if you look at the PowerPoint, I didn't even put this inside of a lesson. I put this as the very first slide because this is like what you would need to know for this whole chapter. Now the first technical numbered lesson is Respiratory Anatomy, which we started yesterday. We labeled a couple of the diagrams, as well as the article called Breathe Deep. So if you were not here yesterday, you got the article today. If you need it, it's posted on Google Classroom. Your article response is due on Monday, and the 3 points are here. 3 is the details of the process, 2 specific ways it relates, and 1 thing you'd like to know more about. Now, we are going to talk about respiratory anatomy. We've already labeled these first 2 pictures. We did that yesterday. Does anyone want to ask any questions about anything that we labeled on those first 2 pictures? All right, so there's one thing that I would like to add to these pictures. It's not something that's easy to see on a picture generally, but because it's in the upper part of your respiratory system, I want to add one little piece to this picture. Yesterday, I mentioned to everybody that you have an epiglottis. It's this piece of tissue that covers your trachea so that food doesn't go down it. The other piece I want to mention is right here. And it is your uvula. It's hard to tell what the picture is trying to represent your uvula as. So if there's someone sitting next to you, do this for me. Open your mouth, show it to your friend, and look for the dangly ball in the back of your throat. That is your uvula. Lots of people think that dangly ball is your tonsils. It's not. I know this for sure because my tonsils are no longer there and I still have the little hangy ball. As a side note, before my tonsils got taken out, they were so big that they touched my uvula. It was disgusting. But the hangy ball in the back of your throat is your uvula. Does anybody know what that little hangy ball does? Yes? It would actually play a little role in the gag reflex, but it has a more everyday type of function. So your uvula is kind of around the same space that stuff could get in and out of your nose. Your uvula helps to stop food from entering the nasal cavity. So that little hangy ball is your uvula, and it helps prevent food from going up into your nose. It doesn't do this 100%, right? Sometimes, if there is an excess of pressure, things could come out of your nose. So, if you've ever had the scenario where you laughed really hard while you were drinking something and it came out your nose, the scenario would be because air was moving past these structures, the uvula wasn't closed properly. I had this fun scenario. Were any of you in my class second semester last year? No. Right after I had my tonsils taken out, because my tonsils were so big, my uvula wasn't properly blocking my nasal cavity because my tonsils were. So when they removed them, there was this big empty space and stuff would come out my nose like just cuz. So one day I was just walking around drinking coffee. Oh, it was my chem class. Yep, they're working on something and I leaned over to look at someone's thing and coffee, like a, not a drip, like a stream of it, just came out of my nose. Awesome. Awesome times. So, if you have your tonsils taken out, you have that to look forward to. Stream of stuff coming out your nose. But I know, for example, some people who do this gross trick where they can put like a piece of spaghetti in their mouth and it comes out their nose. A similar reason would be why you can get stuff to come out of your eye, out of your tear duct, because all those cavities back there are all connected to each other. And so you could get fluid to come out of any of those. Now, so that you know, these are all of the words, or a bunch of words that we already looked at yesterday. Nasal sinuses, pharynx, uvula, epiglottis, larynx, thoracic cavity, trachea. So yesterday, we did all of those except for uvula, and I realized that, so I made sure to add it in today. So those are all of the parts that you should be aware of. You should be able to label them on a diagram and say a little bit about what they do. So while I'm on this page, does anyone have questions about what the function of any of those parts are? I'll just review them really quickly then. Your nasal sinuses warm, clean, and humidify air. So we saw that yesterday. Warm, clean, and humidify. Your pharynx is the common opening where food and air pass from your mouth to your throat. And air that is coming in through your nose goes through that as well. Your uvula we just saw today, it protects your nose from food going up there, sometimes. The epiglottis is the little flap of tissue that covers your trachea so that food does not go down your windpipe. Again, if you are talking or doing something that's forcing air through while you are eating, your epiglottis will not stay shut like it's supposed to. So when your mom says it's rude to talk while you eat, maybe she's true or maybe she's right, but scientifically it's bad for you to speak while you eat because now you are increasing the probability that food will go down your throat. Your larynx, I made everybody touch theirs yesterday. Touch your throat. If you're a guy, touch your Adam's apple. That is your larynx. It makes your voice. If you touch it and make a sound, you'll feel it vibrate. So if you can feel it. Your thoracic cavity is where your heart and your lungs are, so it's that space in your chest. And your trachea is your windpipe. It's a cartilaginous tube, so it looks bumpy like it does on the picture. And that is what connects your mouth to your lungs. Now, in terms of internal lung anatomy, we're going to look at the two pictures that are on the bottom. We labeled bronchi, alveoli, and pleural membrane yesterday because they were also on the top pictures. But some of the things that are here we could not see on those pictures, or it was harder to label. So first of all, we will take this picture. Now, we're taking the lung that's on the right side, but this is actually, remember, the left lung. Is the left lung bigger or smaller? Smaller, why? Because of your heart. So your left lung is smaller because your heart is on the left side and there is less space. So the first thing that we will label is this. That is your bronchi. Actually, since there's only one of them, we would call it your bronchus. So in these sciencey words, often finishing with an I means plural and finishing with US means singular. I'm not the grammar police. I wouldn't take off a mark. I just want you to know they mean the same thing. One's plural. You have two of these. They are the two large divisions of the trachea. One of them goes to each lung. So yesterday someone was asking me about having a crushed trachea and how bad that would be. Of course, having a crushed trachea would be horrible. That's the way that air gets to your lungs. But having a crushed bronchus would be just as bad because that means one whole side would have air cut off. Now, you could survive if only one of your lungs were working. That's possible. You just wouldn't have as high a volume of air come in and come out. The second thing we'll label are cilia. And cilia we're going to add to the picture because sometimes they're so small you can't even see them. But cilia are these tiny little hairs that you would find throughout the length of your respiratory system in all of the tubes. So cilia are little hairs to trap dirt, dust, any sort of particulates that might be in the air that you're breathing in. Now we're calling them hairs, but we had to add them onto the picture. They are very fine, very tiny. So it's not like the hair that's in your nose. The hair that's in your nose is actual hair, like the hair that is growing on your skin. These cilia are much, much, much tinier, and they line the length of all of these tubes that are inside of your lungs. So the little hairs to trap dirt or dust, and they are lining the respiratory system. So you can find them in most places. Now the next word are the bronchioles. And so there are a couple of lines that would refer to that. Both of those lines are pointing to a branch that comes off of a bronchus. So a bronchiole kind of sounds the same. That suffix, we would also use it for an artery. A branch off of an artery is called an arteriole, like we saw with the kidney. So a branch off of a bronchus is called a bronchiole. So this is just a branch of the bronchi. And that is so we can get air transported to all of the surface of your lungs. Next, we have alveoli. Now, alveoli are hard to see on a picture like the one on the top, but the other picture that you have shows a really good representation of alveoli. Alveoli are these little sacs. So alveoli are sacs at the end of the bronchioles with thin membranes that allow exchange and give it a lot of surface. So the alveoli are quite important. Alveoli, we could compare them to the villi in your small intestine. They're the place that has a ton of surface area. They have nice thin membranes to allow exchange. And what you don't see here, but what would be true, is that they are surrounded by blood vessels. So just like the villi of your intestines have tons of blood vessels running in and out of them, the alveoli of your lungs have blood vessels surrounding them. It actually looks a lot like the capillary net that surrounds your nephron. There's lots of little blood vessels there. So alveoli are really important. That's the place that gas exchange occurs. So I'm just going to put a big fat star here. That would be the kind of thing that I would ask a question about, because I can ask you so many things. I can ask you to tell me about why gas exchange occurs here, which direction the gas exchange is going. We can add in questions about blood. So the alveoli, incredibly important. Now on this picture, so that you know, there's two sides to it. The side on the right is showing someone with COPD. It is obstructive pulmonary disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And if you look at their bronchiole, it's a lot narrower on the inside. It's like there's less space compared to the one on the other side, which would be the normal one. So there's an example of what it might look like if someone had a pulmonary disease. We'll talk about more examples of disease later. Yesterday, someone said to me, "Oh, bronchioles? So if I have bronchitis, that must mean my bronchioles are inflamed." That is exactly what it means. So you already know about itis and how it means that that thing is inflamed. So if you have bronchitis, it means that your bronchioles are inflamed. Now this picture on the left here is showing you again your trachea, again bronchi, and again alveoli. So it's just a bit of a repetition of some of the other ones, but it's showing alveoli up close. I think it looks like a little grape stem. So it looks like a stem with a bunch of little round things on it, grapes. Now the last thing that I like to include when I'm talking about your lungs specifically is the pleural membrane. We already saw the pleural membrane. If you look, there's a nice sort of line around the edge of the lung. That is your pleural membrane. So I guess it's this line here that we're talking about. But it's that thin covering that's around your lungs. The reason that we have a membrane around a lot of our organs is to reduce friction. Now, in particular, your heart is in the same cavity as your lungs, and if there was nothing in between your heart and your lungs, they would rub against each other all the time. Your heart is beating, your lungs are inflating and deflating, and that would cause tissue damage. So there are membranes in between your heart and your lungs, and basically most of your other organs as well. There are membranes all over the place. But the pleural membrane is the one that is around your lungs. There's also a membrane around your heart called the pericardium, so it's not just this one, it's another one as well. And generally, these membranes are fluid filled, so there's fluid in the space between two membranes so that even the membranes aren't rubbing against each other. There's fluid in between them so that they can slide. So it's kind of like how you would have oil in the engine of your car to keep things moving without friction. That's kind of how these membranes are working. So we know about your upper respiratory system, about your lungs. Now we need to talk about the muscles that are involved. Now we're going to focus just on a few of them. Please be aware that there are other muscles here, but I'm trying to pick out the major ones. The first and most important muscle is your diaphragm. Now on both of these pictures, the diaphragm is sketched as a line so that we can see the ribs and the other muscles. The diaphragm is represented by that line here. And it is spelled diaphragm, even though you say diaphragm. Diaphragm. So the diaphragm is represented by these lines. Now you'll notice on the diagram that is on the left, the diaphragm is just in one spot. On the diagram on the right, there are two lines that are both representing the diaphragm. Whoops, with an A. And that's to show you that your diaphragm moves up and down. So your diaphragm is the main muscle for breathing. It moves up and down like the picture on the right is illustrating. Now when it moves down, that's when you inhale. When it moves up, that is when you exhale. And we'll go over the mechanics of inhaling and exhaling in just a minute. But that's your diaphragm. So your diaphragm is located just below your rib cage. And so right when the ribs start ending and you can feel that, you can feel where your sternum is. Your sternum is the big bone in the middle of your chest. If you've ever learned how to give someone the Heimlich maneuver, normally they would tell you to look for the sternum and then go lower and give the Heimlich maneuver there. Your diaphragm is just underneath there. That's why you would want to give the Heimlich maneuver there. So your ribs actually continue a bit lower on the sides. So your diaphragm is in the middle, and it's below where your sternum is, where your rib cage sort of ends. Now I'm going to mention the Heimlich maneuver. Why can I not spell the word maneuver? There we go. The Heimlich maneuver, which sometimes might be debatable about whether you should or shouldn't do it, but one of the things that you might wonder is why. Since your diaphragm moving up and down is what makes you inhale and exhale, if you forcefully push on a person's diaphragm and make it go up, which is what you're doing in the Heimlich maneuver, you will force air out. So the Heimlich maneuver forces exhalation. And the idea would be, if you do that, that forceful air might push whatever piece of food is stuck in the person's trachea out so that they can breathe again. Now on TV shows, especially lately, and in movies, there seems to be this trend for them to jump right away to an emergency tracheotomy. Have you seen this? Where they'll be like, someone get me a pen, and they'll take the ink out of the pen and just use the tube and jab it in the person's throat because they can't breathe. Please don't ever do that, ever, even though you see it on TV. It's not the kind of thing that you want to do unless you are a trained professional. Please don't do that. Please, please don't. You could try doing the Heimlich maneuver. The worst you could do is maybe break someone's rib, which is not life-threatening normally. Then you have two other sets of muscles, and we labeled these muscles already. You have the external and internal intercostals. So if you take a look, they are labeled all over the place. Here are a bunch of intercostal muscles. Now these ones at the top, because you can see they kind of look like they're in behind, these would be the internal intercostals. At the bottom here where you see some on the outside, external. I normally wouldn't ask you to distinguish visually between internal and external intercostals because they're just the muscles between your ribs. What I would want you to know, though, is how their function differs. Your external intercostal muscles, external, they are ones that you normally use. And I'm mentioning that because the internal intercostals, you don't use them all the time. So the external intercostals are normally used. They pull the rib cage up and out to allow inhalation. So aside from your diaphragm moving up and down, you also need something to pull on your ribs to move them so you can make space for all this air that you're going to breathe in. Now the internal intercostals, the ones on the inside, they do not get used all the time. We normally associate these ones with forced, whoops, why can't I write today? With forced exhalation. That means we are breathing really, really deeply and we're pushing air out maybe much quicker than we normally would. The time that you would see these external or these internal intercostals being used is when they pull down the rib cage during strenuous exercise. So your internal intercostals, they're probably not getting used a lot when you're just sitting around breathing normally, but when you start breathing heavily, then you need to move your ribs a little bit faster and a little bit more, and those muscles get activated then. I'm not saying that you never use these except during forced exhalation, that's just what one of their main purposes is.